EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the Mastercard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village. Welcome. Now, over the last 2 decades, educational development in Africa, particularly the primary school enrollment in sub-Saharan Africa, has risen to an astounding 99.9%, the highest that it's ever been. But despite these impressive numbers, 9 in 10 children in Africa cannot read with comprehension by the age of 10, which affects their secondary school comprehension. On this month's episode of EdTech Monday, we talk to experts on the foundational learning about what investments and changes have to be effected to the foundational learning space to drive positive change in education. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me today. I'd like to start by introducing you guys. Welcome, Alfred, to the show.
Thank you, Raymond. My name is Alfred Opio, and I'm the founder and CEO at Kano Africa, where we develop mobile solutions that enable nursery children to learn how to read and write in as short as just 1 month, using STEM blended and the British national curriculum to give us better literacy rates for sub-Saharan African children.
All right, thank you so much, Margot.
My name is Margot Hasfa. I'm the founder and literacy specialist at Read to Learn Foundation. We focus on literacy, numeracy, and ICT interventions in communities, slums, and schools by setting up book clinics and empowering young people between the age of 13 to 18 to be literacy champions. So they teach kids between 2 to 12 how to read, write, and spell.
All right, thank you so much, Edward.
Yes, thank you, Raymond. My name is Mnyaneza Edward. I work with Building Tomorrow, a non-profit organization that envisions a world where communities are empowered to provide access to inclusive quality education.
Maybe I'll start here. What is it, when we talk about foundational learning, for people that have not encountered this word before, what is it that we mean when we say foundational learning?
We just have to look at it as like preschool. That is the level before you actually join school. That one usually starts from home. You know, the best form of learning or the introductory form of learning starts from home. Then there is pre-primary, which is what we could call the nursery school or kindergarten. That is what we call foundation. And I think the best way to describe this is it's not summative the way we would look at primary and secondary education. So foundational learning is more of laying the foundation basically, so that the learning that is going to start in primary and secondary will find a good space or good foundation for that to happen. That's how I put it.
Okay, Margot, a lot of learning, even in the later stages, really revolves around comprehension. And we are saying that foundational learning is really the base to start from to enable comprehension. What is it that's failing at the base, at the foundational learning level, that's affecting comprehension outcomes at the top?
I would say what's failing, if you look at it in the perspective of communities and slum areas, pre-urban areas, is most of these kids begin school or any exposure of literacy by the age of 10, 11, 12. This is the first time they come across a book or the first time they come across somebody telling them how to read or anything like that. Before that, there is no exposure. The homes have no books. In the communities, there is no interventions that are going to be geared towards exposing them to that early literacy. So, and then research has shown that a child's development starts, the most crucial part is between the age of 2 to 5. Sometimes up to 6. So when we miss this gap and then start at 10, it's going to be affected. So that's why you find that now a primary 7 child can barely read and comprehend a level 1 literacy book because they didn't have that covered. Even when they start in nursery or primary, the focus is not on literacy. The focus is on academics. How do I teach them science and mathematics? But no one is saying, how do I actually teach this child how to read, how to comprehend, how to fall in love with a book? So I think that's the main gap for me.
Yeah. Edward, when we want to measure the outcomes of comprehension, it's easy, for example, for mathematics, it's easy to tell by the score on the test sheet that you've understood or not understood the concept. How do we measure comprehension for people at the foundational learning space?
For the program I lead, there's a tool by ESA that we contextualized, of course, working with the National Curriculum Development Center. This tool, in assessing foundational literacy, will look out for components like phonemic awareness, the ability to combine letters to read a word, and then it will also have components of comprehension. So you can have a bit of a paragraph, standard maybe 8 words and 4 sentences per paragraph. A child reads and then you ask a comprehension question. Depending on how they respond, you can tell if they are literate or not. So one question may be a direct pick from the text, and another one can be something that will involve them coming to a conclusion based off a text they've read. So that's the literacy bit. In numeracy, some of those standard tools will test for the ability to recognize a number, and then of course the number sense. When I look at 5 and 2, which one is bigger? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So you'll test a child on those 4 components. If they can do those, then the foundation is good. You can throw in word problems, integration, all that complex math.
When you hear Edward speaking, it's like visionary stuff.
Sure.
But we have real problems around teachers being able to access students, and the COVID-19 pandemic really showed us what could happen to our education system. One of the things that really saved our education system during that period was EdTech. And the problem is that technology and education solutions are not easily accessible across the board. What is it that you're doing in your space to make this accessible so that comprehensive learning for foundational learners is accepted?
To answer this is, we came up with a version which is an offline version. So the kind of offline version allows people in fact to reach areas where they wouldn't really have internet access very easily, or it will become costly for them. To be able to download the application and then have the content stored onto the gadgets, so they would easily use it without the active need for an internet connection. And in order to reconcile, because we have assessments there which are done for every learning activity, we have teacher progress that must be checked in, we have so many things that need online reconciliation. So this can be done later when there's an internet connection. So the idea of having an offline version of the Kano mobile app has enabled us work with displaced people, like in Bidibidi refugee settlement in partnership with UNICEF. It has enabled us work with people across far to reach areas in Soroti and other parts of the nation. So the offline version to us was the solution to this.
Margo, can you speak about the contents? If we have EdTech solutions, they're important, but also you need to have content on those platforms. How do we get content onto these platforms that's for young learners in this foundational learning aspect?
We have so many people with so much of this content. So if we can all come together and then see, like, if you're going to focus on numeracy, what aspect of numeracy are you going to focus on? But then after we put the content together, for me the question is now, how do we involve the young people on ground? Because it's enough to try and make change as organizations, but if we go down to the grassroots and empower the young people, these kids are between 13 and 18, they are the change agents in these communities. So once we put these packages together now, how do we make them illiterate? How do we give them the basic ICT skills, technology to run this? Because then if you set up just one library, one community library, but you have over 50 educated literacy champions, then you can pull out and then they will be able to spread this knowledge. So coming together as organizations in different capacities, putting together what we have and aligning on a platform, then seeing how this can be delivered to the young people who then go out and spread the same gospel and the same mission.
But you've done this as a vocation. So what is it that you can tell us about being able to do this kind of work in the past few years?
Yes.
What is it that you can tell us about the success rate, the challenges that you face, for example? Where would, if a partnership is to happen, for example, even on this table, how would that partnership help you, and in what areas should it be applied?
Initially, we were just obviously doing literacy and all. Then when the COVID came, we realized, oh, we can't access the community libraries, we can't access the kids. So we started with 5 kids in one community in Zambia. We came up with a program which was the Literacy Champions. At the start, it was very basic in 2020. And these 5 kids ended up teaching 30 kids. So then we realized actually they were going door to door and all. So we kept on scaling it, and now we are at 500 literacy champions. Each literacy champion is attached to 30 kids. So these numbers actually multiply a lot faster. So now we were doing what they call book clinics, where they come and sit on a trampoline under a tree. Because there's going to be circumstances where you don't have a library. But interventions need to take place at a community level. And where there are libraries, are we partnering? Because in Uganda we have over 189 community libraries. All open, they have the structures, the material, they have tablets, computers, books and everything. But the programs that are going to help them be more engaging and create more impact is what's missing. So if we organizations in this industry actually go and partner with these community libraries, do projects like these literacy champions, book clinics, so that is not just a library that's there as a structure, it's actually causing impact. I'll give you an example of a girl called Gift. She had never gone to school before, but she was attending the book clinic. Then she was enrolled at St. Peter's Primary School at 10 in primary 1. So she goes to school, and then the teachers started asking us which schools have these children been going to. Then the school itself said, how can we enroll children in this school? Because if you teach children how to read, they are going to excel, whether they've ever gone to school or not. And this is the impact that we need to start looking at. How do we equip them with this necessary basic skill at any age, at any level? Yeah.
That's really fantastic. You had a point to make before I bring Edward in. Yes.
I was just listening to what Margot was saying, and I figured out something else. You see, for Kano Africa to come up with the content we have and create this kind of impact, it came from some sort of basic research. You see, NCDC releases very good content. What I mean by very good, I think it's too advanced for most of the practitioners at the ECD level in Uganda. And the detail here is that it is not easy for a normal education practitioner at the nursery level to decipher this content or this curriculum and break it down into digestible chunks to give the children. So because it's low, anybody in nursery school, this is the fact which is not good, but we must bring it out on such a platform. As a school owner, as a teacher, as a head teacher, I will tell anybody that I use the national framework, but I actually don't use it because it's difficult for me to decipher this. It's difficult for me to create digestible bits of it. So going to look at this content that needs to be made simpler because of the shortage of teachers, we need to be able to have content that anybody who doesn't even have proper training in teaching should be able to dispense this content very easily.
Edward, you have a point to make before we go into the break.
Yes, building on what my colleagues have submitted, the aspect of creating content that is so easy and practical for even non-professional players to use. We have people we call community education volunteers. These are community teachers who have at most ordinary level certificate. So we bring them on board and give them these technical skills to deliver foundational learning. Anyone who has the ability to read and comprehend, we can leverage that person in the community to deliver these lessons. So the other thing I want to talk about is research. It is very important for actors in this space to use evidence-based approaches. So like I shared earlier, I lead a teaching at the right level inspired approach. And the lockdown was an opportunity for innovation. When we talk innovation, most of us are going to think applications and tablets and smartphones. But for the communities we serve, even electricity is not available. So there are very many barriers. You can have very good work and applications, but people cannot access them because they don't have the devices or the connectivity. So there is need to leverage old technologies and repurpose them. We repurposed interactive voice recordings. It's basically the service you get when you call your customer care. And you think through it. The moment you call, there is a menu from which to pick. And it's that concept that we repurposed into our Roots to Rise Ewaka program. It's basically a literacy program that involves phone call. The outcomes were that during that lockdown, the learning outcomes gained were equivalent to 1.5 years of quality
school time.
Yeah, school time.
Oh,
so
that's interesting.
that paper is available, and we will be calling partners to discuss these findings soon.
All right, thank you so much. Just hold that thought. Let's take a very short break. When we get back, we get into the conversation around standards for early childhood development training. EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village. Thank you so much for staying with us on EdTech Mondays. Before we took the break, we were talking about all these fantastic solutions you guys are deploying inside the communities. And I wanted to start with you, Edward, now on there's a cultural norm to expect from parents, actually. They expect that their children should get a PLE certificate. They expect that their child will get a USCE certificate that certifies that they've studied and learned. How do you deliver that kind of standard at the ECD level where you're not issuing a certificate? How do parents feel comfortable that their children are learning from community champions, for example?
Thank you very much. So certainly, I think it's justified for them to expect high standards. If you look at the kind of families we serve, a big portion of their income is invested in education. So it would be an injustice for me to invest like over 60% of my household income and then not get standard in return. So the aspect of standards, I think it is important for development partners to rely on research and implement research-backed interventions. It is important for interventions to have robust monitoring and evaluation systems, in that you implement, you make program adjustments that are informed by data. When your child starts supporting you in reading a medical prescription, for example, that's enough. For many of the students that go through, like you shared, 9 out of 10, they may leave the school setting without even the ability to read a medical prescription or correctly solve for change at a shop. So these foundational skills they are practical. I would assure the parents that if and when a child is learning, there are indicators for that, and certainly parents have a role to play. I am very happy that they are holding us and other education partners to such high standards.
Margo, how do you handle this? How do you, for example, explain to parents that your child is meeting with champions in the community who are teaching them something that will be vital for them in the school education curriculum?
So initially, when the book clinic started with the literacy champions, the parents, the first reaction that came, they would come, drop their kids, and then they see a 13-year-old who is there with a blackboard that they're going to teach them and say, you're going to waste our time. We want our children to learn SST, science, mathematics. You know, this is, like, for me as a parent, this is what I know they must learn. Then we say, no, here, we do not teach that. We teach them to fall in love with books. So they would see the kids playing, just playing all the time, and then reading, and then spelling a book and all. That went on for 6 months, but in between we're doing tests and all. Then we did another assessment with the forms. Now we sent the champions back with forms to the parents, and they were asking the parents, what do you want us to teach your children? The initial forms, remember, they said SST, science, nothing else. These other forms, when they came back 6 months later from the parents themselves, they said, we just want our children to learn how to read, write, and spell. Because now the kids, like Edward said, they were back home helping them read the prescriptions, helping them read everything. But even at the every 6 months or something, the parents are invited to see their kids. Yeah, so they see them perform MDD, and then they also do what we call spelling bees, reading competitions, writing competitions. So as a parent, they sit down and then they see their child, who they thought, in most cases, they think, you know, my child has no future. Then the child will come and stand in front of them and say, my name is Gift. I'm going to be a president one day. Today I'm going to read for you a book on climate. Then the child will read and the parent will be amazed. So they become actual recruiters of the program. Because in most of these communities we work in, it has to show impact and evidence that it's working. Without that, they will continue to doubt you. When they see the evidence that this is actually working, you don't have to convince them. So in 1 year, imagine we moved from having only about 30 kids to to 280. And they would come from first signing up, not to come to teach them mathematics and science, to teach them literacy.
Literacy skills.
So it's just when you can provide the impact and also do your M&E very well to show the progress of the project. Yes.
Albert, if you could also answer this question. I know they've spoken about parents, but the other key stakeholder in this education sector is government, and they are the ones that handle regulation and legislation. How do you convince the government that these outcomes are actually worthwhile and important to the greater education system?
What we decided to do was create our own content, use it in different communities, and make sure it works. Not just it works for reports and paper, but it should be able to be seen by anybody without a doubt that this program works. And after getting different reports and documentaries from different areas where we implemented, then we started to approach different agencies, NCDC and the Ministry of Education, because they want to see this. Then what they see from the documentaries and other forms of reports should now be backed up by our reports from like UNICEF that we've worked with, Aga Khan Foundation, and the rest of other agencies we've worked with. I think that's the only way that because I believe we are sort of pioneers in this kind of bracket. You know, we don't have very many players for the early years kind of education. So what we're doing now is just paving way for the next practitioners who are coming. So it's one of the best ways we get evidence out there, show it to the nation, show it to Africa, and then make requests there on how we can operate. One last thing for me is like how we're doing it is Kano is a premium product which we developed for the high-end kind of families or the high-end child, because there is no turning back. There's no giving something subsidiary. So what we do is we don't want to leave anybody behind. Much as we've developed something for the high end, we had to create programs for the last mile child. So we have the social, what we call the social schools in our program, and that's where governments fall. Kano has now expanded to Kenya, Nairobi, and Tanzania. What we are doing is we are in talks with governments, because Kano is charged about $20 per child per term for the high end, the Kano Plus, and $5 per child per term in the Kano Basic. But we have a $1 package, $1 per year for the same premium content, but to governments, you know, and then organizations like UNICEF. That's how we've managed to do it.
Edward, I want you to come in, but now I want us also to talk about public-private partnerships, because it's important for these solutions to be deployed at scale, and the only way you're going to get that scale is by government, first of all, agreeing to the scaling, but also by private sector players coming together in a partnership. So how do we achieve that kind of scale?
So certainly I think we cannot overstate the importance of public-private partnership. As an actor in the education space and from the non-government organization world, we are cognizant of the fact that government is the doer at scale. We certainly have limited resources. So we believe that they're important because the public-private partnerships bridge the gap for resources and expertise. We don't have the resources, but we certainly are aware that government does. And government, I think we can credit it that there's a lot of expertise within the ministry settings. So we need to tap into that. On that note, most of the work we do, we partner with local government, with district education office, and that unit. So yeah.
Margot, how do we achieve it, the private partnerships at scale?
Maybe just to add on a little bit, because Edward has mentioned most of it, but there's also, when it comes to like corporate companies, through their corporate social responsibilities, a lot of them are actually willing to come on board when it comes, if it's a financial institute, their main aim is, okay, we're going to include financial literacy. Then what else are we going to add? Okay, numeracy, how does it combine with the financial literacy? But we can also leverage a lot when it comes to resource and funding, as opposed to it being very external based. It can also be very internal within Uganda, that we work a lot with all these other private companies, because as a corporate companies, they have to invest in social corporate responsibility. So us, we have to justify why there is a need for this, and then how does it align with the organization's overall goal and all.
But if, for example, we wanted to have these clinics that you do in about 60,000 parishes of Uganda, how would we achieve that? What's the future for that?
This definitely has to be in partnership with the government and different influencers in education. Now, for instance, soon we're going to be launching with KCC a partnership where we're going to roll out what they call the in-school book clinics. See, you go to school and you have the interact clubs and what. In most of the, I'll talk about the government schools, the libraries are not being used at all. There are no ICT centers and all. But if we open a book club, and then the book club is just there for numeracy, literacy, and the basic ICT, they can have just one computer that they use when they come together. So when you partner with KCCA, KCCA has over 79 schools. Then you know that now you can roll that campaign in those 79 schools. Then you go to Wakiso. You go, I feel like the best way to scale it is working with implementers in these regions as well, and then private companies as well to do the funding. Yes.
Edward, you had a point to make before?
Yes, and it's on partnerships. So Building Tomorrow was one of the organizations that received funding from MasterCard to implement a project called Tomorrow Is Now. And this funding was given to do systems strengthening, post-COVID recovery. That saw us work closely with district local government. You know, primary education is decentralized. Most of the key decisions, other than curriculum, are made at the local government level. So we partnered with districts like Kasanda, Mubende, and these have since taken on some of the best practices from the program, like taking on community education volunteers, doing follow-up visits for their community camps through the district inspector of school office and the like. So partnerships are very, very key in achieving this.
Yes, so maybe we start now to make our concluding remarks. So what would be your parting shots from this very lively conversation?
I think number one is government. The Ugandan government needs to understand the importance of EdTech in moving this nation forward. I just want to bring us to cite, there's a World Bank report that was done for 20 years in the Caribbean, and that report entailed taking on little children from urban areas and from rural areas. The ones in rural areas were split into two, and some were given early interventions in early childhood, and the rest were left just to move the normal way. And after 20 years, some of them got into universities and the workforce. The children who were exposed to early interventions in numeracy and literacy were found to achieve two things. Number one, they were earning higher in their wages in the labor workforce compared to their counterparts who did not get this. This builds economies. Number two is that they were able to learn better as adults. Many times as adults in offices, we do not want to even learn anything new. For us to prepare the nation for the gig economy, which is coming very, very soon from now, where 50% of those jobs are non-existent today, and they will not be based on qualification but on skill set. The best way is to prepare the nation and Africa by improving foundational literacy and numeracy, early childhood education. Yeah. All
right, thank you. Margo, your parting shots?
If we do not want to fail the next generation as a country, then it's very important that we invest in foundational learning. But this has to be when it comes to policies. Yeah, budgets, where are the budgets that are aligned to literacy and numeracy development? Where are the policies that are going to affect all these changes? And then Edward mentioned that most of the nursery schools are private owned. So that means we are really creating that gap, because if you look at the economic structure of the people in the rural areas and pre-urban areas, no one can afford this structure. So if we have universal primary, then what's happening before that? Because if somebody gets to primary but they've not had the right foundation, we are failing them. You've seen with the report, it says that those who are exposed had higher chances of succeeding than those who are not. So where are the policies, where are the budgets, and how are we coming together to make sure that it's accessible to all children, regardless of where they come from?
All right, thank you. Edward, your part in short?
Certainly, I cannot overstate the importance of research. Bringing the research closer at home, in 2018, the World Bank produced a report on Uganda, and it was so disheartening to learn, and there are a lot of controversies on it, that in a classroom of 100 students, only 6 can read and comprehend a simple sentence. When it comes to numeracy, it's no better. Only 4 out of 100 students can do an age-appropriate math problem. So it is important for, I understand that the process of curriculum development and what is very rigorous, but and of course policy formulation, but these should be informed by research. All partners out there that are working in the education space, let's incorporate a lot of research and data-driven interventions. On that note, I think we have an ongoing partnership with the University of Notre Dame and Makerere University and Chambogo to run an RCT that we run until November to see how some of our interventions have been, the impact they've had on communities. We hope such outputs will inform policy and have a wonderful foundational learning outcomes for all students in the country. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, my panelists. Thank you so much also to our audience that stayed with us. Thank you so much for watching EdTech Mondays Uganda. Of course, this is held by the MasterCard Foundation in partnership with Innovation Village and happens once every month. We're trying to have as many conversations as possible on the EdTech space so that we can find solutions for many young Ugandans who are out there in the education space. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of EdTech Mondays. Have yourselves a good day. EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village.